Mr. Laszlo Bartha is an ethologist, who has been breeding and working with large livestock guardian shepherd dogs with decades. In the past 15 years he has lived in Sakhiafold, which is situated in eastern Transylvania. This small region is very special in our days, as on this small region, there are more wolves and bears are living wildly and freely than in whole Western and Central Europe combined. In this region it is completely prohibited to hunt, or kill these predators. Only livestock guardian shepherd dogs can keep them away from the sheep flocks that are gazed in big numbers in the mountainous pastures where they are grazing. These dogs work like as if they were living in the age when shepherd dogs were invented and used in big numbers. Mr. Bartha, after talking about other LGD breeds, now, let's talk about KANGALS. As fat as we know, you travel to Turkey many times to find and buy really good KANGAL dogs. What were your experiences?
When I went to the city of KANGAL, I saw a situation there. I don't even know if it's tragic or comic, but it's probably tragicomic. That I got into a house where the yard was guarded by two KANGAL types of shepherd dogs. Unfortunately I got there in the dark, so I couldn't make appreciable shots of them. They were almost entirely in line with what I think of a shepherd dog. The owners warned me not to look at these, but come inside the house. They took me to a garage that didn't have a car, but 2 or 3, in quotes, KANGAL dogs who were long-legged and very elegant, that they put in the garage because they thought that they were so valuable so that they could sell it and that they were of great value. Well, these, they said, are the good dogs. From these, they thought, I'd buy from them, and I saw that these were dog mixes. Many Turkish breeders realize that the Western market needs such very tall, rustic-looking, big-headed dogs. And now that would be genetics, I'm not going into it, just for the sake of a single little circle, that this color of the KANGAL, they say, the Rufus gene brings this color, this beige color, in different tones and the strong mask, and the dark, tabby darkening at the feet. But not all KANGALs have darkened feet, all in general, most masked, their feet do not always darken. This is very inherited. Very dominant. And this, especially if they are brought together in the same way as the yellow dogs, or the masked English Mastiffs, and they realized that if they were mixed, they would make amazingly spectacular dogs in the F1 generation. It even moves me to say wow when I see these dogs, that's right, this is a dog. At least in appearance. They are huge, 90 to 100 centimeters high, and the dog brings that rustic and athletic form from the KANGAL, and the big bones, the big size and frame, from the Western breeds. The two get together very well. The Heterosis Effect, who knows a little breeding, knows what it is. The Heterosis Effect appears, and these traits combine very well. The colors are right, and they look good in a bunch of good dogs, but they are no longer good with a flock. But who cares about the dog next to the flock in the West? Then he doesn't have to be next to the flock, he has to be presented in the city, and he has to show the status, how serious he is. And then these could be sold at unbeatable prices, in any quantity. They are all sorts of KANGAL and some mixture. The so-called Boz Brothers Kennel, who may have started this, as far as I know.
Who are they? The Boz brothers?
We call them that because their name was Boz Kennel, and the dogs that came out of it got the biggest fame in Europe. And many people consider the Boz KANGAL to be the KANGAL, which is a complete mistake. Well, they took great advantage of this and wrote it, because they had such connections in Turkey when there were still a lot of good KANGALs, that they were collecting really great KANGALs in their kennel, but classic KANGALs, at least in appearance. They looked at the dogs and said, that's right, this a real shepherd dog. And they didn't regret mixing them with these big-boned Western dogs imported from the West. And I say dogs were made by them in the F1 generation that made my heart beat even for me. I'm still sensitive to the look and the anatomy, although I know it's just one thing. And these dogs became widespread, but they're no longer shepherd dogs, and then what came into the second version is F2 generation. Anyone who knows about breeding knows that one like this comes out of F1, so to speak, an intermediate hybrid, so that it brings roughly the average of the two parents. This is a very interesting genetic regularity. The point is that if you put these hybrids together, it will fall apart again, so the Riggins will clearly reappear, the Great Dane will appear inside a litter, or the almost Great Dane will appear, or the English Mastiff appears, or even the pure KANGAL, the old, real shepherd KANGAL, appears. And then the breeder there, if he is skillful, of course immediately takes out the very dubious puppies and just shows what he wants. Well, most of these dogs didn't get to real breeders, but to average laymen. The layman did the pairings, and then it could be seen what was going on in the background.
And if we talk about the KANGALs that were in the forecourt, so the ones that still qualify as real LGD dogs? How did those perform when they turned up in your region as working dogs? How true is the KANGAL myth?
How can I say that? The KANGAL myth is not a myth. The original classic KANGAL is an above the average classic dog. But there are very few original classic KANGALs. So it's always the case that a couple of classic dogs make a reputation for the breed, and then that average, or even the scrap, sails after that reputation. This is the big problem. Lay people can't tell the whole thing, it's already sociological, or I don't even know commercial business class to see how it works. But this is pure trade, not dog breeding. The point is that I saw a lot of very good classic KANGALs. For example, the KANGALs taught me that the quadratic requirement in connection with the Central Asian Shepherded standard is a stupidity. In connection with the Central Asian Shepherd, we learned from the standard that it is good for the dog to be square, which means that we can draw the body and legs into a cube or a square. And that it's good, and we thought for a long time that it's good. Many still think it's good, at least they accept it. And then when I saw the KANGALs galloping, and I saw what their structure was, I realized that something was wrong with this square structure, because these KANGALs are galloping fast. They have a much larger floating phase, because many Central Asian Shepherds don't even have floating phase anymore. The floating phase is when the dog itself gallops with its back and floats in the air before it reaches the front. Now there are big and heavy Central Asians that are shameful to see, they have no floating phase at all. So in connection with Central Asians, I have to tap into the Central Asian Shepherds a little just to understand what I want to say about the KANGALs. As they become more and more well known, the usual tendency began that they should be as big as it is possible. Many breeders worldwide actually advertise their dogs by size, kilograms, and weight. This is the bottom of dog breeding. It's no longer even about how they guards or fight, or how they look, just how many pounds and how many inches. And breeders give their name to that and push it on the dog market. Shame, it's been a category of shame, and they take these dogs. They make 90 centimeter, 90 kilogram dogs like that, but these dogs have no floating phase in their gallop, if they can gallop at all. So he pushes himself with his back, but he already puts the front right away. The shepherd dog begins there, that at least it has a noticeable, perceptible floating phase in its gallop. So they can push themselves with their backs by floating in the air for a while before they get to the ground with the first ones. Now and going back to the KANGALs, sorry for the detour, when I saw that long floating phase in the KANGALs and saw that the dogs are long, the back is long, the loins are long, the tail is long. Then I just thought that maybe that's why their floating phase is so long, because it's all over. Their spine is like a spring, because at the gallop we see the spine pumping like this, not like in a trot, where the spine is roughly stable, and the legs, and the angulations, determine the effectiveness of the trot. With the German Shepherds it is understood in an amazing way. But the gallop is a completely different one. It is not a step, it is not a walk, in fact the gallop is a series of jumps, and the spine already has a huge role in the jump. When I started saying this in the breeder community who asked my opinion about their Central Asian Shepherd dogs, I said, the dog is short. What? That's how it should be. Well, how do you say that? Isn't that good? No. Forget that. Because the long Asians, because there were some, usually had bent backs, their backs were soft, their top line. In fact, their backs are not bent, let's just say, but their backs and loins bend together because those tendons, those ligaments, and the muscles aren't tight enough to keep it straight. Of course, the longer something is, the tighter it needs to be to stay straight. But it's still long, not a mistake, let it be so tight that it's straight anyway. Because if you have these two, both long and tight, your movement is much better. And the KANGALs raised him for that. The observation of the KANGALs, the movement and structure of the KANGALs showed that it was a defect in the Central Asian standard, a defect in the expectation of the Central Asian breeders and judges that the dog be square. This is a big mistake, very bad in the standard, should be corrected urgently. The KANGALs were able to point this out as a requirement, and if it's good, it can bring amazing movement.
Mr. Bartha, We would be curious about the working abilities and the character of the KANGALs. What are your experiences in connection with them?
Yes, the KANGAL. When I went to the Sivas region in Turkey, I remember one of the shepherds allowed me to go into his house. When he found out that I was Hungarian, that I was from Hungary, the elder Turks for some reason think that Hungarians are a brother nation, and if they find out that you are Hungarian, they are immediately more cordial, at least 2 degrees more cordial. And then they are already willing to invite you into their house, and all. And he called me to his house, gave me tea, and so we tried to communicate hand to hand, but it was completely uninteresting. He saw that I am a dog man, I showed him my photos, my videos, and then he motioned for me to just come and show him something. He opened a small chamber door, a low door, so I bent down, and there I saw a KANGAL bitch lying, and a young lamb beside her, and it was clear she was breastfeeding. She was not breastfeeding at the time, but as a breastfeeding nurse she was to the little lamb. The lamb's mother may have died in calving, or the bitch had suckled the lambs anyway, and the KANGAL did not know what happened to her puppies. She became a puppy. The old man might have thrown it away because she didn't need a dog and she was breastfeeding their lamb. And I was completely shocked, because I hadn't seen anything like this before. I could not even imagine that a dog can do that. Well, I could not imagine, because there are dogs kept in such houses. I know how to raise a cat, and I hear that. But that a rustic shepherd dog that is not so handheld, bred, and socialized, I could not have imagined that he was capable of such a thing, and this KANGAL produced this smoothly by suckling that little lamb. Absolutely impressed. I saw the same thing in a ranch in Hungary. Formerly they managed to get real good LGD KANGALs brought from Turkey, really brought from Turkey, because on paper everyone brings them from Turkey. So they really had KANGALs brought from Turkey, and first they went out to Germany, they were taken out by Turkish guest workers, then they couldn't handle them, and then a bitch and a male were returned to Hungary to this ranch. And there I saw an amazing situation where the KANGAL bitch was tied up somewhere and not far away from her a Central Asian shepherd bitch was tied up and both bitches had little puppies. And there were several of us and we talked, and I didn't videotape it because I often get so immersed in things that I forget to start the video. But we talked on the porch, and all of a sudden I saw the KANGAL bitch throwing back all the food for the little ones, right, because the shepherd dogs, the shepherd dogs with good instincts, still have the wolf instinct, or wolf-like instinct, that the puppies go there and beg, and they shall lick their mouth. And the KANGAL bitch threw all the food back to her puppies, and they began to eat it. Of course, the puppies of the Central Asian, who were next to them, smelled it, and ran to eat it, but the KANGAL bitch chased them away. So the alien puppies were driven away by the KANGAL bitch from the food he had vomited back. The hens also noticed what happened, and then the hens went there too, and the KANGAL did not chase the hens away. I can't even put it right, she let her own puppy eat, did not to allow a foreign puppy of her own species to eat, and hens eat because they are domestic animals, because it was coded in her that you can't harm them. So she lets the chickens go there for the food she has just gulped back. Compare this to what I have just read in an international LGD topic, where Western breeders chat, that their biggest problem is that their dogs often kill the domestic animals that they should have guarded. This KANGAL bitch did not kill a lamb, but that she allowed the chicken, the hens, to eat from the food she fed back to his own cubs. My friend, who owned these KANGALs, told me, here are thousands of years of work and breeding and selection in these dogs, it is a culture. And he was right. It is completely impossible to reproduce this in other parts of the world in 20, 30, 40, or 50 years from suburban situations. It's like a Damascus blade, we don't know the secret how to do it. I don't even know how to cultivate it, it can't be done consciously, because it's the work of a millennia, the constant selection of a millennia, and it's more and more strict, more and more nuanced selection. Other than that, I was still very rude when, for example, fighting KANGALs. I saw it on video. A match I simply couldn't even imagine before. Dogs could fight so hard, so long, so rough. Which is not to say that one likes to watch a fight, but it means that dogs get an amazing load in the fight, nervously, physically, their energy balance, their oxygen balance, their pain threshold. And what all these dogs could do is simply unbelievable. As I am researching Eastern LGD dogs, and in their original circumstances they are many times weighed by the shepherds by fights, I had to watch hundreds of fights and analyze them on video. But these dogs, what they did in the field was for me something like a shock. I said no, this can't be done in a short way. So I say their movements, the hens, the animals, their relationship with the lambs, their struggles, so it spanned an amazing spectrum, from the roughest to the finest, the most careful, that was unimaginable for me until then. I knew if KANGALS will start flowing into Europe, they would sweep all other shepherd dogs away. And to my complete dismay then, and by now I am accustomed to this thought, it did not happen as I expected. I had to realize that people don't see these extra values anymore. In the crowd of dog breeds that exist today, these fantastic values no longer make a difference, as the people of our age cannot see these. So the KANGAL came into the West, it became fashionable, but interestingly, it couldn't set the Central Asians aside, just as the Central Asians set aside the Caucasian shepherds. Good KANGALs have an inherited skill set that is brilliant, I don't even know how to put it well.
Genetic heritage?
Absolutely, absolutely. But something so complex and so nuanced, so chiseled that I couldn't have imagined until then. I couldn't even imagine. I just said the good thing now, and it would seem like as if I were doing marketing for the KANGAL, so I want to correct that right now with the criticism. What came after that was the disappointment. Disappointment on all levels. Because on the one hand, a lot of people clearly began mixing KANGALs with other breeds. And the serious thing is that a lot of it is a mixture that doesn't even show up on it, and it's even a mixture because it doesn't show up in its phenotype, it's just in its genotype or behavior, and you don't see it in a picture or a video. Even the Turks began to began to stir. Why give them a good dog? Because if they have a good dog, they won't take more from us. Give them dogs that look good, which then won't be good, and then they'll come again to buy really good, and then we'll give them good in the second round if they absolutely need to be good. But they don't need to be good because they don't understand their nature and virtues and usability. Such a mass phenomenon set in motion, mixtures came in that were not KANGALs, and the breeding itself could not carry it on. Even if he brought in a good one, he couldn't carry it on because there wasn't enough space for it all. These dogs, and I will return to this, require the space in which they live, which is similar to the amazing Anatolian plateau. If anyone has been there knows that, there are amazing spaces there. In relation to the Carpathian Basin here, it is incomprehensible, who has not been there, cannot imagine the vast spaces there. The space that the KANGAL filled was here in Seklerland was too small for the KANGAL, they could not assert themselves, and they could set out on the path of degeneration. And it started. I didn't get any really good dogs from Turkey. I didn't see any serious tests or exams with them that would have proven that they really are the type of dogs. And there was a great opportunity in this, when the KANGAL finally got there, that the shepherds at home in Seklerland could already buy it. He was able to get to them too, because at first the price was so high already in Seklerland, the price was so high that a Sekler shepherd would buy a KANGAL for some €1,000, put him to work next to the flock. So it was a completely unrealistic situation because we'll expose the €1,000 dog in a situation where he is no longer alive the next day because he was killed by a bear or a wolf pack. And when they finally arrived and began to work, it was amazing to see that the space was small for them. This is partly bad, partly negative, but partly positive, because we have smaller spaces, closer pastures, more inhabited areas, and the problem with these KANGALs is that they got out and got along with them, that they proved to be quite good in some respects, but in some ways not. One of the aspects that didn't work out is that in an incredible way, let's say we're there, they go wild. This means they are very strongly encouraged to drive away, disturb, and chase the predators. But so much, to such an extent that they go away from the flock for half an hour, 4 hours, because they discovered a wild boar, or a bear, or a wolf. And they chase them through the forest, through the field, when it is no longer justified or needed. So there is a limit to how long it is worth to chase away a game, so that not everyone wanders around the flock there, but beyond a certain distance it is no longer justified to chase it because we may already be on the other pasture, in the territory of the other flock, and it is worth it. But they can't tear off, the prey drive is so strong, it's their passion for hunting that they can't leave the game when they should, but they're still going. This is bad on the one hand because they go into another area where they have nothing to do, and on the other hand, what's worse is that they leave their own flock unattended for too long. The other thing related to this is that they are incredibly aggressive towards other dogs as well. So they specifically hunt for dogs. A normal LGD dog sees that on the hillside opposite there is a flock and its dogs, not going over there to fight to find trouble. Yes, they are there, we know, it's okay. If the KANGALS notices on the opposite hillside that there is the other flock with the dogs, they run through it, in 15 minutes, they reach through in 10 minutes, and the misfortune begins. They fight for good, they come back, or one of them is destroyed, or one is killed there, or they are badly wounded, they have to be cared for, the wound becomes infected. There is tension between the two herdsmen, between the two shepherds. So they are impulsive on such a level, that if they see a pack of dogs somewhere at such a distance that they shouldn't be dealing with anymore, they are even then go and fight the others. Just as they go too far in the wild, they go too far for a fight. These two add up like this: either it's away because he's gone to fight, or he's away because he's gone to chase predators. Or he doesn't come back at all, because predators kill him as he ran too far.
So they are not constantly with the flock.
If you go to Anatolia, Turkey, and you see how much space there is, how far the flocks are away from each others, if there are still any, how much less predators there are, you will understand it. Yes, this impulsivity is in its place there, in that endless, vast space. There you can play your own frames. The limits of this are too narrow for us, and all kinds of dysfunctions, and all kinds of inoperability result from this. And here, it became clear to the shepherds at home in Secularland that the dog had not been good for a long time, he had only done him trouble for a long time, but the prestige of the breed purity, the earlier I referred to him, he took it so much that he tolerated them more, supports them. He prefers to have an argument with the other shepherd because he has a herd of KANGALS. All sorts of side forces are starting to work in the direction of being forgiving with your herd, making it look good, while when you go out and you're there with it, you see that it's not as good as the old ones, but they have prestige, they have business, you can sell puppies well. And then he reinterprets this for himself and raises his own stimulus thresholds, not so strict against them, he makes them look good, though not so much. That's why it's very hard to figure out how good a breed is, what it's worth. The KANGALS have good things, like all kinds, they have bad things, or they have things that are bad here. It doesn't work in this space, in this Central European space, but it works in the East. But then, to put it all bluntly, marketing, human weakness, opportunism, profit-taking, and then it's very, very difficult to get a clear picture of it, and the concept of variety is problematic. Everything is problematic. But I even tried to give a little taste of their good stuff, their bad stuff, to do so as a kind of introduction outlined.